Hello dear readers and subscribers. Welcome to another video in our series Great Art Since 2000, and this time we're going to talk about performance art. With performance art, very often they manage to create an experience that is not possible in other artistic disciplines. Hence, it being very much worth it to have an open mind, to have a closer look at the upcoming iconic performance artworks. So in this week, we'll present 5 of our 10 selected performance artworks, and then in 2 weeks' time, definitely stay tuned for part 2. Enjoy!
Santiago Sierra's 160 centimeter line tattooed on 4 people from 2000 is the work most people cite when they want to explain why they find Sierra unbearable, which is perhaps precisely the point of his work. Staged at El Gallo Arte Contemporaneo in Salamanca in December 2000, the piece involved 4 women, sex workers with heroin addictions, who were hired to sit in a row while a continuous line was tattooed across their backs. Their fee was the street price of a single shot of heroin, roughly 4 times what they would ordinarily earn for a sexual act. Sierra had been developing the format since the late 1990s in Mexico and Havana, and would go on to hire undocumented street vendors to bleach their hair, and asylum seekers to sit inside cardboard boxes. The standard defense, that the tattoo is not the scandal but the conditions that make it purchasable are, is both true and perhaps slightly too convenient. 2.5 decades on, 160 centimeter line remains the century's most efficient demonstration that a line can be drawn on almost anything if the price is right. The question, however, that the work refuses to answer is the one it hands to us. Where do we draw the line that would make this impossible and put ethics and decency before economic precarity, or even before art itself? Pope L had been crawling through American cities since the late 1970s, but the Great White Way is the crawl that grew into an epic. Beginning in 2001, he set out to traverse the entire 22-mile length of Broadway on his elbows and knees, wearing a Superman suit with a skateboard strapped to his back, completing the route in segments over 9 years. The title puns on Broadway's theatrical nickname, while stating the racial premise outright. A black man lying on a New York sidewalk risks being read as one more piece of civic scenery, unremarkable enough to step around. However, the Superman suit makes that indifference impossible to sustain, one could argue. Pope L described his practice in terms of have-notness, and the crawls literalize the vertical hierarchy of the street with a directness that no sculpture could manage, perhaps. What keeps the work from didacticism is its absurdity. The skateboard is useless, the suit is ridiculous, the artist is visibly exhausted, and the fact that Pope L was funny about it all. His influence widened considerably after 2000, in part because the art world finally caught up to a body of work it had spent 2 decades walking past. Zhang Huan had already spent in the 1990s testing what a body could made to endure. My New York of 2002, staged for the Whitney Biennial, is the work in which that endurance turned outward. The performance began indoors, with Zhang carried into the museum courtyard on a palanquin beneath a white cloth. When the cloth came away, he was revealed wearing a suit of raw meat, sculpted into grotesquely oversized muscles, a bodybuilder, a superhero, or a side of beef. The artist then walked barefoot through the streets around the Whitney, handing white doves to passerbys. The meat suit reads as the most obvious kind of metaphor until you register the doves that are being released, at which point the work refuses to be read unambiguously. It is simultaneously an image of aggression and an act of release, of strength worn as a costume, and of tenderness handed to strangers. Zhang stopped making performances after returning to China in 2006, which lends My New York the retrospective kind of weight of a farewell to a medium that actually made him. Jennifer Ayora and Guillermo Calzadilla Stop, Repair, Prepare of 2008 begins with an act of considered vandalism, a hole cut through the center of an early 20th century Bechstein grant. Blasphemy, one could argue. However, this intervention allows the pianist to stand inside the instrument, leaning backwards over the keyboard and playing the fourth movement of Beethoven's Ninth, the Ode to Joy, upside down and mirrored, while pushing the wheeled instrument slowly around the room. 2 octaves have, of course, been destroyed by the incision, so the melody arrives structurally incomplete, missing notes it cannot recover. Beethoven's setting of Schiller has served as the anthem of the European Union, was appropriated by the Third Reich, and has been sung at more or less every occasion of state congratulation in modern history. A melody so thoroughly claimed by opposing ideologies that its meaning has been sanded off. The result is also unexpectedly moving rather than merely clever, which is arguably a harder outcome. MoMA acquired the piece and staged it in the atrium in 2010, where the sight of a pianist wheeling a surgically wounded Bechstein through a crowd proved considerably stranger than any description of it. For the Mexican pavilion at the 53rd Venice Biennale, Teresa Margolles chose to do almost nothing that is actually visible. Each day of the Biennale, the floors of the Palazzo Rota Ivancic were mopped by relatives of people killed in Mexico's drug war, using water mixed with blood and residue collected from the sites where those killings took place. Visitors therefore walked across the damp floor, largely unaware of what they were walking on. The pavilion's title posed as a question answers itself. What else could we talk about? And at that moment, there was nothing else to talk about. Margolles was trained in forensic medicine before working as an artist, and her practice has consistently used the physical remainder of violence as her medium and material. Morgue water, recovered glass, deteriorated fabric. The gesture is perhaps closer to some sort of a ritual rather than a performative spectacle, and its power depends actually entirely on information that is being withheld. A room that has just been cleaned is the most ordinary thing imaginable. It becomes something else, of course, once you know how it's been cleaned. And the cleaners are also not trained performers. They are actual mourners, real grief. And the daily repetition of the act over 6 months turned the pavilion into something between a crime scene and a wake.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Feel free to find more iconic top lists on contemporaryartissue.com in our online magazine. And of course, also feel free to have a look at the playlist that I have created for this specific series to find more information about iconic and great paintings, sculptures, and more. Support us on Patreon and please consider subscribing to stay posted for more contemporary art. Bye.